Today we're going to be doing Module 2, Lesson 17. The objective of today's lesson is to estimate sums by rounding and apply to solve measurement word problems. Materials needed for today are your online whiteboard or your whiteboard dry erase marker and dry eraser. We're going to continue to follow the teaching style where I do it, we do it, and then you do it alone. First, we have a new vocabulary term. Our new vocabulary term is addends. Addends are the numbers that are being added together. So if you look in this example, 2 plus 3 equals 5. 2 and 3 would be the addends because those are the two numbers that we're adding together. The next is reasonableness. Essentially, reasonableness means, does it make sense? So if you look at this example, first it has 2 plus 2 equals 5. 2 plus 2 is a pretty common equation. We know it doesn't equal 5. It doesn't make any sense. So you can see they crossed it out and then put equals 4. Okay, so as you're answering word problems, you're going to be looking for answers that make sense. If your answer seems like it's really high, or it's really low, then it probably doesn't make sense to your word problem. Okay, for our fluency, we're going to start out with a skip count. We haven't been practicing these as much lately, but our next module will be getting right back into multiplication, so let's go ahead and get some more practice in. We're just going to be counting by 2, so the numbers are on the screen there if you need to use your finger to follow along. Okay. Remember, as I point my finger up, you're going to count up. Starting with 2. Ready? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. If you feel like you're getting really good at that, I highly suggest you look away from the screen as you're counting and try to count them on your own. Let's go ahead and do the same thing, counting by 3s. When my finger points up, you're going to start at 3. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24, 27, 30. And last one, skip counting by 4s. When I point up, start at 4. Ready? 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28, 32, 36, 40. Okay. Next, I just have a short little video I want you to watch. It's addition with regrouping, okay? And that's what we were practicing last week, adding 2 3-digit numbers together and having to regroup to find the answer, okay? Okay, make sure you have your whiteboards down. You're going to be watching this example that I'm doing. This first example is estimate the sum of 362 plus 159 by rounding to the nearest 10. Okay, so we're rounding to the nearest tens place. I've got 2 numbers here I have to round before I can add them together, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my 2 vertical number lines with my bottom, my top, and my halfway point. The first one, we're going to be trying to find 362. Okay, if we're rounding to the nearest 10, we're looking here in the tens place, which is at the 6. So we're going to keep the 3, keep the 6, and put a 0 there at the bottom. Now we need one more 10. Right now we have 36 tens, plus one more 10 is 37 tens. My halfway point, we know, is going to keep my 36 tens, and we'll have a 5 at the end because we're running to the nearest 10, and halfway between 0 and 10 is 5. So that's why we end in the 5. Now let's find 362. 360, 361, 362, 363, 364, 365. So right here is my 362. Okay. I know that 362 is below my halfway point, which means I round down to 360. So I'm going to write that over here, 360. My next number is 159. So I'm looking in the tens place, and I have a 5, so I'm going to keep those 15 tens and add one more 10 for my top number, which is 16 tens. My halfway point keeps the 15 and puts a 5 at the end. Now I just need to find 159. 150, 151, 152, 153, 154, 155, 156, 157, 158, 159, all the way up there towards the top. Plot my point. I see it's above halfway, which means I round up to my top number, which is 160. So I'm going to be adding these two numbers together, okay? I figured out about what those numbers equaled, and now I'm going to add them together, okay? First over here, I have 0 plus 0, which is 0. Next, I have 6 tens plus 6 tens, which is 12 tens. So remember, I'm going to put 1 10 on the line and the 2 ones below. 6 plus 6 is 12. Now I have 3 plus 1 plus 1, 3, 4, 5. So how this would be written is 362 plus 159 is about 520. Okay, when we round to the nearest 10, it equals about 520. Okay, go ahead and pick your whiteboards up, and this one you're going to try with me. We're rounding, estimate the sum of 296 plus 609 by rounding to the nearest 10. So first we're going to set up our 2 vertical number lines with the bottom, top, and halfway. I'll give you a minute to get that set up, and then we'll start rounding those to the nearest 10. Okay, first number we're rounding is 296. We're rounding to the nearest 10, so let's look in the tens place. There's a 9. We're going to keep what's in the hundreds. So we have 29 tens, which is 290. We have to add one more 10 to get our top number. 29 plus 1 is 30. So our top number will be 30 tens, which is 300. Now our halfway point, we're rounding to the nearest 10, so we know it's going to end in a 5. We're going to keep the 29 and put the 5 at the end there. Our halfway point is 295. And now we need to find 296. Let's go ahead and start counting to find where that's at. 290, 291, 292, 293, 294, 295, 296. Plot a point there. 296. 296 is above halfway, which means we round up to this top number, which is 300. So over on the side of your whiteboard, I want you to start our addition equation by putting a 300. That's the first number we'll be adding. And now let's go ahead and start by rounding 609 to the nearest 10. Look, in the tens place, there's a 0. So we're going to keep the 6, keep the 0, end in a 0. So that's like having 60 tens. 60 plus 1 is 61. Keep the 0 at the end. So our top number is 610. Okay, and our halfway point, we keep the 60, and we have a 5 there at the end. All right, let's find 609. 600, 601, 602, 603, 604, 605, 606, 607, 608, 609, and 610. Now this is where you're also checking for reasonableness. If for some reason your top number was 620 and you had accidentally wrote the wrong top number, when you're counting and you go to 609 and you realize your next number is not 620, that's where you can go and correct that number, okay? So that's why I always start by counting at the bottom to make sure all the numbers are making sense, okay? So we plot our point right here on 609, which is above halfway, so we round up to the top number, which is 610. So I want you to go ahead and go over to your problem where you have 600. I want you to add 610 below it. Make sure all the numbers line up, the hundreds, the tens, and the ones. And then we're going to add that together. Make sure you have your problem ready before we get started adding. Step 1 is always start in the ones. 0 plus 0 is 0. Now we go to the tens. 0 tens plus 1 10. 0 plus 1 is 1. And then in the hundreds, 300s plus 600s, 3 plus 6 is 9. So 200, you don't have to write this part, 296 plus 609 is about 910, rounded to the nearest tens place. Okay, go ahead and put those whiteboards down. I have one more example I'm going to show you, and then I'll have you try it. This time we got that same number that I used the first time. Estimate the sum of 362 plus 159. This time by rounding to the nearest 100. Okay? So very similar to what we just learned, except this time we're rounding to the nearest 100. So I'm going to set up my 2 vertical number lines. Remember, you're watching this part. My bottom, my top, and my middle. First number is 362, so I'm going to look in the hundreds place since I'm rounding to the nearest hundreds. And there's a 3, so I'm going to keep the 3 and have 2 zeros, which is 300. Now I need one more 100 for the top. 3 plus 1 is 4, so the top is going to be 400. For my halfway point, I keep that same 100, which is 3. And I end in 50, and that's because we're rounding to the nearest 100, and halfway between 0 and 100 is always 50. So we're always going to end in 50. Now I need to figure out where 362 will be, and I know it's going to be right above where 36 tens is. 36 tens is 360, so let's look for that. 300, 310, 320, 330, 340, 350, 360, 370, 380, 390, 400. So 362 is right in here between 360 and 370. So I'm going to plot a point there. That's above halfway, so I round up to the top number, which is 400. I'm going to write that over here for my equation. And then I'm going to start rounding my second number, which is 159. I have a 1 in the hundreds place, so I'm going to keep that 1. 100 plus 1 more 100 is 1 plus 1, which equals 2, so my top number is 200s. Halfway point, I keep the 1 and have a 50 at the end there. Now we're looking for 159. So we're going to be counting by 10, so I'm going to look in the tens place. I'm looking for 15 tens, which will be 150. 100, 110, 120, 130, 140, 150, 160, 170, 180, 190, 200. Now 159 is above 150 and it's almost to 160 because right after 159 is 160. It's very close to halfway, but it's still above halfway, so we're going to round up to 200. So I'm going to put that 200 over here in my equation. And I'm going to now add these two together. First, I start in the ones. 0 plus 0 is 0. In the 10, 0 plus 0 is 0. And in the hundreds, 400s plus 200s, 4 plus 2 is 6. So 362 plus 159 is about 600, rounded to the nearest 100. Okay, go ahead and pick up your whiteboards where you're going to do this example with me. Estimate the sum of 296 plus 609 by rounding to the nearest 100. First, I want you to draw your two vertical number lines. With your bottom, top, and halfway, bottom, top, halfway. Give you a minute to get those vertical number lines ready. Okay, let's start with 296. We look in the hundreds since we're rounding to the nearest hundreds. There's a 2, so down here at the bottom we're going to have 200. Top number is 100 more. 2 plus 1 is 3, so we have 3 hundredths. Halfway point, keep the 2, put the 50 at the end. Our halfway point is 250. Okay, now we need to figure out where 296 is. So let's look at the tens. We're going to need 29 tens, which is 290. Start at 200, 210, 220, 230, 240, 250, 260, 270, 280, 290, 300. So 296 is above 290, but not quite to 300. So I'm going to plot my point there in the middle. It is above halfway, which means we round up to the top number, which is 300. Go ahead and put your 300 over here on the side of your whiteboard. Have it ready to add. Now we're going to round 609 to the nearest hundred. So let's look in the hundreds and we have a 6. So down here we're going to do a 6 for 600s. For our top one, we need one more hundred. 6 plus 1 is 7. So our top number will be 700s. Our halfway point keeps the 6 from the bottom and ends in a 50. Remember, because 50 is always halfway between 0 and 100. Now let's look in our tens place. We've got a 0. Since we're counting by tens, we're going to be looking for 60 tens, which is 600. Here's our 600, 610, 620, 630, 640, 650. Now 609 I know is above 600 and it's almost 610 because that would be what comes next. So I'm going to plot my point right next to the 610 line. $610 is below halfway. So we round down to the bottom number here, which is 600. So go over to your equation and add that 600 there to the bottom. And then actually I would like you to message me the answer to this equation in GoGuardian once you have it. Okay, so you're adding 300 plus 600 and message me the answer when you have it. Okay, so let's see if your answer matches mine. Step 1, start in the ones. 0 plus 0 is 0. In the tens, 0 plus 0 is 0. In the hundreds, 3 hundreds plus 600, 3 plus 6 is 9. So 296 plus 609 is about 900. Okay, you can go ahead and erase your whiteboards. We're now at the part where you're going to be working on your work alone. So the homework is IXL skill P5, which is estimate sums up to 1,000. Okay, so it's going to give you an equation, and it's going to tell you whether you're going to be rounding to the nearest 10 or the nearest 100. So this one says to the nearest 100. So first you'd have to round 757 to the nearest 100. Then round 126 to the nearest 100. And then add them together to figure out your answer. Okay? Make sure you don't try to just guess, because then, as you know, your IXL will take you down if you're wrong. It's better to spend the time to actually draw out your vertical number lines and to make sure you're getting your estimation, your rounding correct, so that your estimation is correct. Okay? Go ahead and begin.